Appreciate everybody being here for this. Obviously, an awesome day today. Want to thank our fans. I know we had a little bit of an adjustment going from Saturday to Sunday, but I had no doubt that Gamecock Nation would show up today, and so thankful for the crowd that we had. That was awesome. I know it's going to look great on television, and really appreciate those guys working with us through the change and showing up today as well. Obviously, the format was a little bit different for us today. Primarily because of injuries. I mean, you guys saw, I think we had 23 players that didn't play today that would be normally playing if we in a game. So we had two teams divided up, like I talked to you guys about in the press conference earlier this week. And then when with the injury situation, we had 3 scholarship running backs out. We didn't know if JJ was going to play until really yesterday, so credit to him for coming out and having the kind of game that he had. But with that set up, or knowing that, we just couldn't divide into the two teams, so we broke it up very similar to the way we did our two scrimmages, offense, defense there in the first half, and then the second half, so to speak, was competition, which was good. And then again, a lot of those injuries are postseason surgeries, rehabs, things that we've already had, and then some of those things that are just some bumps and bruises that have happened throughout spring practice. Special teams, we did that drill there at the end of the first quarter. We've to finish up the spring. That's something we've been doing all spring practice. We didn't do punt today as a full group. Coach Limbo, what he did on the punt team at Memphis is different than what I did at Oklahoma and other places, so we prefer not to show everything that we're doing on special teams for the whole world to see. So that's why we did what we did. But I was pleased overall. It was good to see the offense come out. I talked about it earlier in the week. I wanted us to be efficient offensively, being able to get in and out of the huddle, minimize the pre-snap penalties, and feel like we did a great job of doing that. It's good to see us run the ball. Zaquandre White and Jaheim Bell, we knew they were going to have the opportunity to have big days today with some of the injury situations we had at running back. So I'm really excited about those guys. Like I mentioned a minute ago, great to see JJ and those guys come out and make some plays. So overall, pleased. We got out of it fairly healthy for the most part. Had a couple minor ankle injuries, but nothing long-term from that standpoint. So excited about the day overall. And now we go into the summer. Our guys have exams starting this week, so we got to finish up strong academically. They'll be gone. A lot of them will be gone in the month of May, and then we get back here June 1st for summer school. And this is a huge, huge summer for all of us, players and coaches. We've got to take another step as a team. I just told them in the locker room that there's no doubt we've gotten better as a football team from January when we started the off-season program to now. We've gotten better, but still not good enough. We've got to take another step here this summer and then in the training camp. But excited about where we are right now and love this group. They're hungry. They work hard. They do everything that we ask. And like I mentioned the other day, I wish we had 15 more spring practices. 1, we need them, and 2, I'm having a blast coaching them. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
And welcome, man. What's up? GC Live Monday edition. That, of course, the voice of South Carolina head football coach Shane Beamer. A very in-depth opening statement there from Coach Beamer. Carried hit on a lot of topics, hit on a lot of subjects, and we're going to do the same here today with GC Live. Welcome in. Shout out to all our posters and chatters that are already here watching and listening. And, of course, shout out to our good buddy Clint Hammond. Clint Hammond is, of course, of the Mortgage Network right here in Columbia, right across from Dreher High School. If you want to go check it out in person, ClintHammond.com is the way to do it online, or just give him a call, 803-771-6933. If you're in the market for a new home, or maybe you just want to save some money and refinance with your current deal, interest rates still very, very low, and an opportunity there for you to do some business with a guy who's not only a huge Gamecock fan, but also a huge supporter of Gamecock Central, and, of course, our primary sponsor, presenting sponsor here on GC Live. So, once again, that's Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, presenting sponsor, ClintHammond.com, 803-771-6933. A very, very sort of busy weekend, of course, for us at Gamecock Central. And I think a situation there for the fans where exciting weekend it seemed to be. Of course, the spring game, the close of the first ever spring practice of Shane Beamer. They were lucky. Actually, great weather throughout the entire spring. I don't think they had to use the indoor at all. Then we get this terrible weather for Saturday. They bump it to Sunday. Proved to be an outstanding decision. And we got a little taste. Chris and I watched the game. We were in Atlanta for the Rivals camp. That only happens once a year. We felt like we had to be there. Several prospects, we might get into that later on, that we needed to see. But we watched the game, the replay here on Monday morning, and really, and just a chance to actually see the guys, see what we've heard sort of with our own eyes visually. As Quandre White with a big day. Lots of fan opinions I've seen online, fan opinions on the message boards, fan opinions on the Twitters. We'll get into that. But first, Chris, without going into, don't give away everything yet. What was your first initial impression, your first initial thoughts from the spring game Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, to keep it short, honestly, the first thing I looked at, which was not a surprise, is wow, there's a lot of guys out. Shane Beamer mentioning that 23 guys are out, and I think, Wes, the thing that I took away from this, again, we're going to get into a lot more of the details, break down individual players, all that later. So I don't want to get into too much of that, but I think the biggest takeaway, and this goes just about every year, but especially this year for South Carolina, don't take away too much from this particular game, especially given the circumstances. That many guys out. Even if South Carolina was at full strength, you'd be sitting there wondering, okay, let's say if the receivers had a great day. Well, we know that there's depth issues at DB and things like that. We knew, for instance, this year that they'd be down a few running backs. So let's say the running game was not as good, as it was. And it was pretty good yesterday. It was Quandre White. Obviously had a really good performance. But if it wasn't as good, you wouldn't walk away saying, oh, the run game shot this year, because they had 3 scholarship running backs out. So I think not getting too up or down on individual performances or team performances, I think that was the biggest takeaway for me. I certainly have opinions on some individual players and offense and defense and different things like that, but that was really what stood out. Just being able to conceptualize and visualize what we knew, that there would be a lot of players out, and sort of recognizing, seeing some of the different plays that happen and putting them into their proper context. That was my biggest takeaway, that it's one spring practice out of 15 spring practices. We know some of what happened during some of the other ones. This is the only one that was publicly available, the entire thing, and with a big portion of the roster sidelined.
Yeah, and Chris, by the way, shout out again to our chatters. That you can't get anything past them, by the way, Chris. First of all, Chris, yes, his face is redder than usual because he forgot his sunscreen. I forgot my sunscreen as well. And I need to do a better job of wearing sunscreen in general, but that's neither here nor there. Completely forgot it. We're in the sun, from 8 a.m., from like 7:50 a.m. to 3:30, 4. I don't remember.
A while
on Sunday. So could not get that past them. And also could not get it past them that, yes, I don't have my actual normal microphone. So if the audio sounds a little different, it's the regular computer mic, which is actually what we used to use before we upgraded our microphone situation. But that at least tells me the investment in the upgraded microphone was the right move. If they could tell immediately, right off the bat, within 2 minutes, hey, dude, you sound like crap. So apologize for that. I think the content, because we have a lot of stuff to talk about, will hopefully be better than the sound quality here. Now that we have gotten sort of the caveat out of the way, it's a spring game, you can sort of take, if you looked at all the spring games in the history of spring games and looked at the big time performances in spring games and compared that to the percentages of guys where it carried over to a huge fall. I'm guessing it's like a coin flip at best.
Right.
At best. I'm sure there are guys, especially with newcomers, maybe a freshman early enrollee just pops right off the bat, or a guy that maybe was behind some older players and then really gets his chance, comes up. It's not that it means nothing, but
right.
How many times have we seen spring performances that just do not carry over? Especially if the later you get into a spring game, and of course they only gave us 2 quarters and then some situational stuff. The later you get into a spring game, the less it matters as far as actually projecting what's going to happen because you're getting less and less of your starters on the field. All of that said, I think major shout out to Zaquandre White, who, availability can be your best asset. And he's been available all spring, hasn't missed reps, hasn't missed practices, special teams, running back, multiple ways this guy is going to be able to help South Carolina. I know we know what South Carolina has in Kevin Harris. We think we all know what South Carolina has in Marshawn Lloyd. That's good and all. But as we sort of let's talk out of both sides of our mouth here, at least I'm going to. As much as spring game itself is not a huge indicator for future success, I say because this is what White has been doing from what we have heard all spring, right? Now, this is our only real opportunity. Even when, Chris, you and I were able to go out there for the media parts of practice, they're not actually running plays. This was our chance to actually see it for ourselves. But apparently it's been like that all 15, they're out there. So I tend to think, what did we learn this spring? I think we learned you can further strengthen South Carolina's, how we feel about South Carolina's running back room. That was never a question by any means, but I think it just solidifies what we all thought coming in. And maybe even you say that group's even better than we thought, and that if you're the staff, you're sitting there saying, I got to get 11 in this mix as well. It's not just Harris and Lloyd. I've got to find a way to get 11 on the field.
Yeah, for sure. And I think taking it, again, put the spring game in its proper context, but also you take all the other things that we've heard about Zaquandre White. You take the fact that, look, this is a guy who was a big-time recruit out of high school. And before the spring game, and in fact, several practices before the spring was even over, leading up to the spring game, we had heard that Zaquandre had been having a great spring, when the team was a little bit more full strength. And, from what we've heard, the coaching staff is very happy with his progress. He's really balled in. He's been one of the leaders of the team. I think we saw some of those signs. So, I think sometimes you can even look at the on field, just the feel of it. If a guy catches 6 balls in a spring game and you're just looking at the stats, well, is he catching 6 balls against a bunch of walk-ons in the fourth quarter of a spring game or in situational work or whatever it may be? Or can you turn on the tape and see what he's doing? And so with Zaquandre White, like you turn on the tape from yesterday, and even against some of South Carolina's better units, he's making moves. He's making great cuts and showing good vision. He's running through contact. He's doing some of those things that he's been doing this spring and showing a great attitude and sort of bringing some juice with him as he's doing it. So that was one where I think you can actually take the spring game performance and see it as, the fruits of what Zaquandre has been doing this spring. And so no doubt he can be an asset. I mean, I think, another play I think of, you look at the little South Carolina threw a little screen out there to him that wasn't very well executed at all. It was very ugly, not a great pass. Linemen, everybody was bunched up together. He sort of gathered it up, got a first down out of it. So I think there are certain performances that you can look, putting them in their proper context, but you can still understand what it means. And so for Zaquandre White, he's certainly earned more opportunities this season, even with a running back room that, if it's healthy, is going to be pretty deep.
Yeah, I mean, you look at him, you look at Jaheim Bell, what he was able to do. That was something we, had heard and hinted at and didn't really straight up say, was that Jaheim Bell has been working some at running back in the spring. They obviously, some of that is just, hey, look, there's an extreme shortage at running back for the game with Harris, Lloyd, and Amos all out. So that gave Jaheim Bell an opportunity. But I think you do sort of see kind of what they're thinking. Bell lined up at tight end, Bell lined up at running back, Bell lined up at fullback sort of as well. So I think they see him as someone they can move around, get out there in a variety of ways, and you can split him out wide and sort of use him kind of like a flexed out wide receiver as well. So I think those are And in fact, Colin Taylor has an article up right now saying, White and Bell earn, you know, more playing time going forward. And I thought, by the way, I know I had a super long Beamer sound bite or video clip, depending on how you're watching or listening at the beginning. But I do have a couple more of these that I may get to throughout the show. And before we get on past Z White, I wanted to get Beamer's thoughts on that, because I thought it was interesting. The very last thing that Beamer says about Zaquandre White is he points out how this performance is valued by the coaching staff, how he took advantage of an opportunity, and how that is going to lead to future carries for Zaquandre White.
So fired up for him. That's the way he is every day in practice. That's the way he is every single workout. I've told the story that the very first walkthrough we had in the indoor back before we even started spring practice, we handed the ball off to him one time, and he, went full speed down the sideline, ran 30 yards to the end zone in a walkthrough. And I remember turning to JJ and Tonka and Aaron Sterling and some of those guys on the sideline, kind of like, what's up with this guy? And they said, Coach, he's that way every single play, and he is. He's always got a smile on his face. He's high energy. I love the way that he competes and the way that he runs the football. He is a weapon for us. He does a great job on special teams, and he's going to have I think he's going to have a big time 2021 season. He with Kevin Harris and Marshawn Lloyd and Rashad Amos not playing today, he took advantage of that opportunity. There's no doubt about it. And he's going to get a lot more carries because of it.
Yeah. So point being, Beamer made a point to point that out, that, hey, this guy was there. And not that the other guys can help it that they're out, but, his availability, the fact that he brings it every single day. I took that as, hey, we're going to make a point to recognize that this will be rewarded come this fall. And just good to see that for a guy. I mean, we talked about Zaquandre on the show a ton last year and how he's the first guy off the bench to greet his teammates. First guy off the sideline, I should say, to greet his teammates after a big play. The energy he brings to special teams. So I think a lot of it, Chris, has just been sort of finding a way to eliminate some of his ball security issues. That when he came in, the staff last year thought he was going to be a guy who could make a big impact. Never really played out that way. An injury early on in camp, which I think hindered him quite a bit. Anytime you have a soft tissue issue at a position where you need explosiveness, like running back, if you're not 100%, you try to come back and then you turn wrong and boom, it's, you're out another 2 weeks. So you have that, the ball security stuff. All those were issues last year. He's healthy. He's obviously an explosive kid, great lateral quickness, has some interesting vision, I would call it. Like he sort of finds seams like that not all backs sort of notice almost. Now, some of that, his running style, I think, in that he's sort of just all over the place at times, does maybe tend to have hurt his ball security stuff, because I think it lends itself to you getting hit maybe from some angles where you're not expecting it. But he's obviously worked on that, and excited for that kid. Just talking to him when he was enrolling at South Carolina, you could tell he was a special kid that had been through a lot, been through the JUCO days, and certainly pulling for him as a person, because he's obviously worked really, really hard to get this opportunity. So, I think let's transition a bit. I think to big picture and scheme. The scheme's very vanilla. I thought, that was by design, certainly. But Chris, I thought there were some takeaways we can have on the approach on both offense and defense. I think you sort of started to see, you brought up that, that screenplay to Z White, the timing on it. I mean, it looked like a team that is in their first spring within an offense. Some plays look really good. And this is with any, this is football. Some plays look really good. Some plays look really bad. But the distance between the really good ones and the bad ones, it was like a large distance, because it's like the timing at times, you're still sort of trying to sync things up. When's the ball supposed to come out on a particular play? When, how's like the offensive line on that screenplay was all out of whack, all out of sync. But you could sort of see what they're trying to do. I thought there was quite a bit of these like these like tight, it's spread at times as far as personnel, but these sort of tight formations that we saw a ton from Joe Brady at LSU, that sort of Joe Brady influence on this offense. The fact they did huddle, but they could go no huddle. They could go fast tempo when they wanted to, when they needed to, sometimes down near the goal line. Didn't really see a lot of the vertical passing game. We saw some of the underneath stuff. I think a few RPOs mixed in there, but vanilla, but we did at least get a little glimpse as far as what this offense is going to try to be.
Yeah, formationally, we saw some things. That was one of the big takeaways I had, Wes, and you mentioned that on previous show or two. Some of those condensed splits, as they call it, where you're in those tighter formations, and right now you could see some of the mental errors, whether it was maybe a protection breakdown or a timing breakdown. Sometimes a play really worked out where it was, from a scheme standpoint, executed well. I'm thinking of one in particular where E.J. Jenkins was wide open underneath. There's another receiver open, and Luke Doty threw it and completed a pass to another receiver that was open. So you saw some of those things, but sometimes it was just the timing that was off, or sometimes there was a mental error where you could tell. But, were they going to show a ton? No, we knew that. But we did get a little bit of a sense for the offense and how multiple it's going to be. You saw some different types of running plays. You saw some jet type action. We saw under center handoffs. We saw some different types of run scheme stuff. So we did get a little bit of a sense for that. And I don't know, maybe what fans expected or what we expected, aside from maybe a few base plays here and there. But you do see and get the sense that it's going to be a pretty multiple offense. And I must say, Wes, definitely an emphasis on tight ends. That is not just a recruiting pitch that South Carolina's staff has used. They really sort of put their money where their mouth is in terms of scheming up the tight ends. Does that mean it was thrown to him every play? No. But the way that they used Jaheim Bell, now some of that obviously, like you said, due to the need at running back, but even taking that out, the way they used him, the way they used E.J. Jenkins, some of the other tight ends, some of the looks that they presented there, certainly an emphasis for this offense.
Yeah, and that there was a play, and South Carolina's had this play in their book last year as well. But in the sort of goal line situational work at the end, the play where Kevion Mullins scored on, where they threw it out to him in the flat a little bit, I think that was an RPO, because early on in the game, when Nick Muse was still in the game, they ran that very same look, but handed the ball off, I think, to Zaquandre White. So that was an RPO that was just basically designed like, okay, we're going to have a run call here inside zone, I think, or one of their duo runs, and then we're going to just attach this little RPO that gets our tight ends the ball in the flat in space. And you don't always see that emphasis traditionally on, hey, let's get the ball to our tight end in space. Like that's more something for receivers. But I think with this group, the athleticism they have, that's something we will continue to see where, maybe the tight end is sort of you're not necessarily running the offense through them, but you're going to heavily involve them. And we've seen that these guys can be moved around. Obviously Nick Muse is tight end one, but like we talked about earlier, Jaheim Bell moved around quite a bit. E.J. Jenkins was lined up actually attached to the line at times, but then actually split out pretty much, like a wide receiver at times, especially down near the goal line. That's something Beamer has sort of hinted at, prior, that we want to use this guy split out down near the goal line. So I think, Chris, there will be a constant competition. If you're playing wide receiver or tight end, you're not just competing against the other wide receivers or the other tight ends. You're competing for when South Carolina puts their premier group on the field, like their very top group. And of course, we know they're going to shuffle personnel in and out based on matchups. And, you don't want to just go out there in two tight ends or three receivers the entire time. You got to mix things up. But when it's fastball time, basically, like their number one group, is it going to be with two tight ends, or is it going to be with three receivers and one tight end? So you're in a constant sort of back and forth competition across the way to that other position groups for this staff to say, I would rather have, for example, Jaheim Bell on the field than my third wide receiver, or I'd rather have my third wide receiver on the field than my second tight end. So I think there's going to be a constant battle between those two things moving forward. But early on, you gotta think, and we're going to start being a broken record, I think, this offseason about the tight ends. But you got to think that getting multiple tight ends on the field in multiple ways will be a big part of what they're going to do.
Yeah, and so you got personnel, like you mentioned, Wes, and then you have play design. So when you have certain guys on the field, and let's say South Carolina's in a 3rd and 3 situation, well, most offensive coordinators or all of them are going to have in mind. Obviously, you're going to want to give a quarterback a lot of options unless you're running the football. But what is your decision? Who do you want the ball? Who do you want to carry the football? Who do you want to go to with the football? Who are you designing the play for? And so maybe that's Kevin Harris or Marshawn Lloyd or Zaquandre White on a certain kind of run. Maybe it's a tight end. So making yourself more valuable, like you said, and Zaquandre White's certainly a great example of that. Making yourself more valuable, having the coaching staff trust you in certain situations is obviously big. So they're competing for, obviously, within their position. They're competing to get on the field to show their value to where, like you said, Wes, if you're weighing 2 tight ends and 1, and then also who's getting the football when. And so some of South Carolina's better playmakers have so far, and what they've shown in their career and even during the spring, some of those guys are at tight end. Nick Muse, Jaheim Bell, Kevion Mullins, from some of what he showed last season, some of what he showed in the spring game. Those guys are arguably more trustworthy at this point than maybe some of the guys in the receiver room in terms of getting open, catching the football. So that's something that's got to weigh in.
I will say, I think we got to throw a shout out there to Kerryon Joyner. We'd heard it. Steph had talked about how much he had sort of just really worked hard to become a leader in that group, and has busted his tail as far as working. The whole group has worked on the jugs machine, putting in extra work. In a very small sample size, I thought Joyner had a good day. He did some things that after the catch on a 3rd and long couldn't quite get to the marker, but the key for him, as you and I have talked about, Chris, is to try to get him the football, give him some room. Once you can get him the ball, he's always been someone who can make people miss once he has the ball. So his big thing, I think, since transitioning over to receiver has been to continue to get better playing without the football, finding ways to get open, finding ways to accelerate and create separation against man press coverage. And I thought he had some catches yesterday. He had a contested catch yesterday for a first down, and again, extremely small sample size, but I do think it was a pretty good day. That, if you're going to maybe single a guy out in the receiving room, other than maybe an EJ Jenkins, so you can call him tight end, call him a receiver. He did a little bit of both yesterday. Joyner was the guy that my mind sort of immediately went to.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was certainly going to try to get to it before we end the show. I think I went back and keyed in on him on several different plays and sort of watched back, and I thought there was improvement in several different areas. One of them, Wes, was just blocking. Not that Joyner is out there putting guys on their rears or anything like that, but I think just the effort that he showed in that department, understanding some angles in the run game and things like that. I thought he did a good job with that. My number one, you already mentioned it, the number one thing that I think he had to improve on was, as you said, playing without the ball in his hands. So if you want to play receiver effectively, you have to be able to get yourself open, not just be able to be schemed open. So this is an understandable transition for Joyner. This is the guy that was a quarterback in high school and for some of his college career. And so I don't know if it was fair, especially when he's bounced back and forth and been banged up some. Okay, he should be a finished product in the SEC, by last year. That probably wasn't fair. But that said, he wasn't, and there's a lot that he needed to work on. And so I think we've seen some improvement there. Catching the football in traffic, getting himself open. And then he continued to show that open field ability that you mentioned. He's got, when he gets the football in those short areas, he has some burst, some acceleration, some quickness, and can make people miss. So I think that was an encouraging sign because that did sort of show some of the traits that we've heard about coming to fruition.
We're going to talk a little bit of defense, of course, maybe some standouts there, but obviously, before we move on from offense, we got to talk about quarterback. It never, ever fails that quarterback position is as diagnosed and dove into and sort of just I would say overanalyzed as any position on the field. That's been the case. Apparently, in the 24 or so hours since the spring game, that's been a big topic of conversation. And I think partially part of that is because of what Beamer said after the game, and that was that Luke Doty, pretty much, and it's kind of I'll let Beamer explain it for himself, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, unless something just totally changes between now and when we watch the tape, I mean, Luke Doty is our starting quarterback, and like every other position, that is going to be competition throughout the summer. By no means are we anointing Luke, but I mean, Luke has taken every rep with the first team all spring practice. I didn't see anything today to make me, think otherwise. He's great. Now, it was great to see Jason make some throws. Great to see Colton do some things today. Connor, that whole group. But we're competing. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Luke's got to continue to get better. Luke's got to continue to progress over the summer. Luke's got to have a great preseason training camp. But yes, as we come out of spring practice, Luke's our starting quarterback. Now it's his job to continue to earn that and continue to compete between now and the Eastern Illinois game.
So, all right. First of all, Chris, how much of this is semantics? Because, I mean, yes, it's a headline. It's one of our headlines on our site. It's going to be a headline on any site that covers South Carolina.
Yeah. Luke
Doty is our starting quarterback. That I believe was part of the exact quote from Beamer that we just heard. Luke Doty has been the first string quarterback from some, I was going to say for all of spring, really since before spring. Beamer said that before spring even started. Luke Doty is a starting quarterback. He's actually said multiple times, Luke Doty is our first string quarterback until somebody steps up and can rise to his level and pass him, has been how he's described it. How much of what Beamer just said is new information, like he's the starting quarterback, and how much of it is just really the semantics? I mean, he went on to say he has to still continue to earn the job.
Right.
He didn't say he's our starting quarterback regardless of what happens. Is this news or is this just semantics?
Yeah, I think it's more semantics because I mean, look, Luke opened. I remember going back to Beamer's pre-spring press conference. I mean, he said there he's very open about it that we're going to have competition. It's a new staff. It's a clean slate, but Luke is going to take the first rep the first day at quarterback. Well, whenever the ball is snapped and there's a quarterback there, it's going to be Luke, and so we figured that, but that's how they ended up doing it, and really. Wes, the reason for that at the time was he was the guy that had the most experience on the team returning, right? That nobody else had played as a Gamecock at that point. When you look at Connor Jordan, Colton Gothier, true freshman, Jason Brown transfer. So that made total sense. That said, he hasn't done anything to lose it. And as Beamer said in that clip you just played, Luke Doty has retained that status throughout spring. He's continued to take first team reps. So I don't think it's as newsworthy. Like you said, I think you hit it there. He didn't say no matter what, he's going to be the guy. There will never be competition. It's over. Nobody else should even try. But I do think it was a little bit of semantics there where there's a little bit more made of that story. I think it's taken on a little bit more life because some people are looking at, for instance, what Jason Brown did in the spring game in that limited sample size and then sort of playing those two things against each other. But yeah, I tend to think not as, noteworthy of an item. Here's what I go back to. We got to remember, again, this is one spring practice out of 15. One. This is the only one that was televised. This is the only one where everybody saw everything that happened during the spring. And by the way, this team, the least healthy it's been all spring with 23 guys out that would have played otherwise. So we know that Luke has been the first string guy throughout. Was it his best day yesterday? I do not think so. I certainly think there were some things. Did Jason Brown make some nice throws in certain situations? Yes, I do. I do think he did. But you got to put all that into context. We know at the beginning of the spring, for instance, that Jason Brown had a huge learning curve through no fault of his own of just being able to step in. He missed some time at the beginning, so he's catching up on the playbook. He's catching up on the speed of the game and all those things. So, again, one spring practice. I don't think it's that wise to say, well, they named Luke the starting quarterback and make too much of that and say, well, what about Jason Brown? Are they not going to let him compete? Yes, they are. And again, proper context is one spring practice that we all saw as far as what the quarterbacks did. And they did it in circumstances that were a little bit unusual because how the game was structured and who all was in and who all was out.
Chris, I think for one, not only just one practice, this was essentially half of a spring game. Like it was not even a full spring game. It was half of a spring game. And I think, and y'all, I'm not like gonna try to generalize for the entire fan base because there's different opinions on every situation.
For sure.
But I do think there is a large portion of the fan base right now that has a bit of sort of fatigue from last year about the quarterback situation after for all season long, for most of the season, prior to the season even, feeling like the quarterback position was mismanaged. That's still a thought process from the majority of this fan base. I think, like, based on what I see, the outspoken part of them, or at least, feel that the quarterback position was mismanaged. Well, even if that is true, Chris, I have to think we now have to turn the page and remember these are different people making these decisions now. You cannot hold the quarterback decisions of a prior staff against the current staff. There were 7 passes delivered by Luke Doty yesterday in the actual game part of this thing. There were 5 passes delivered by Jason Brown in the actual game part of this thing. So we're going to judge the future starting quarterback on a grand total between the two of 12 passes. Like that doesn't make any sense. It's great to talk about because that's what sports are about. We can talk about it and discuss it. But there is no conspiracy theory here, which you almost get the sense on our message boards on Gamecock Central. There's literally a post about that it's a conspiracy theory going on here. There is no conspiracy. Jason Brown missed early time of practice, so he was behind from the beginning, no fault of his own, and then is coming from an offense that structurally is very different from what South Carolina does and is doing and will do on offense. So I think there are 2 things you can say. 2 things can be true. Like you can say Jason Brown made some really good throws on Sunday. Nobody's taking anything away from Jason Brown. He made some actually really good throws. Got the ball out quick. Got the ball to his former teammate and current teammate EJ Jenkins. You can tell that connection is there. They know exactly where each other are. As far as camaraderie there, and it's almost like, I don't know. I guess when you play with a guy for as long as they've played, he knows the exact timing to get him the football. But then you can say that and also say it doesn't mean he's going to be the starter or should be the starter because, frankly, Colton Gauthier was the second guy out there at quarterback. Connor Jordan was the third guy out there at quarterback. So Jason Brown was the 4th guy out there at quarterback. So I think this leap we want to take, and we've seen it a million times before, but people were leaping to throw Luke in there last year, and now two and a half games plus a spring game into Doty's career where some people are ready to pull the plug on this. Like that's that's fast even for this college football current era that we are in.
It is. And again, if you take only what you see, there are things we've been talking about this all show of what do you take away from a spring game, what do you not? And again, this one's even different than a regular one. So probably even less. There's some things you can take away, some things you sort of, and so for this one, bear in mind, it's one practice. It is a good thing that Jason Brown made some nice throws. That's a good thing. They need him to continue coming on. Maybe, Wes, we get to the preseason. I mean, who knows? Like, I wouldn't project this right now. Maybe we get to the preseason and Jason Brown is just so good in practice that say we need to give this guy a look at playing. Maybe that happens, but we'll talk about that later when it happens. We're going off what we know right now. And so what we know right now is through 15 practices, the coaching staff, a new coaching staff, not Will Muschamp, Mike Bobo, any of those guys aren't on staff. They're not there. Brian Holinsky's not on the team anymore. Colin Hill's not on the team anymore. So it's a totally new, clean slate staff. Their assessment is Luke Doty's the top guy. And so there's not any ulterior motive of, hey, they're trying to keep all these different guys happy. Like right now, Luke's the starter, and then they're going to continue competing and really just call a spade a spade. That's where it is right now. And I think that's totally fine to say that because that's where it is.
I will say this. I think you actually, when I looked at the 3 scholarship quarterbacks throwing the football, if you're a Carolina fan, you actually can feel not that the quarterback position is settled yet by any means, but I thought all 3 the ball came out of their hands very well. There were a couple of balls where Luke Doty had to stick it in there, and he showed that he can put zip on the ball as well. I thought Colton Gothier had a throw on a dig route to Ortre that was not completed that you said, I mean, I'm not going to say it on the show, but I was like, this dude can – I was like, dang, this guy, the ball comes out very, very nicely and on rhythm and with with some pace and a nice spiral. And then, we talked about Jason Brown putting the ball where it needed to be, getting the ball out on a pretty quick basis. And that's something I even thought a lot of, if y'all will notice, maybe this is somewhat coincidence, but a lot of what they called when Jason Brown was in the game, they didn't put him under center, I don't think. It was more spread variety, true spread like he's used to playing in at St. Francis. So, I think there, with Doty, it was a little more under center. It was some of that stuff, hand the ball off under center. We even saw some pistol. So I think it was a little more geared towards Jason Brown when he was in the game. And so the key moving forward is for all these guys to use this next. It's April 26th. South Carolina, the kids get May off. So these next 90 days that have got to be huge for the quarterbacks. For Jason Brown, it's going to be get out there with these wide receivers all summer and to dive into this playbook because it's very different than what he was doing at St. Francis. And, for Doty, it's going to be to continue to work on timing and, getting the ball out quickly and getting the ball out on time and stuff like that. But it's not a finished product for any of the guys. So I think just this talk is fun because that's why, we wouldn't have a job if people didn't like to talk about sports and debate it. So I'm not just trying to discourage anybody from talking about it, but this whole idea of there's a conspiracy at quarterback is a little too out there for me to hop on board with. So let's talk a little defense, Chris. Any standouts? JJ Ngbare, dude's out there beating double teams of pretty good players. Not a rep that a couple of offensive linemen are going to enjoy watching in film review with Greg Atkins today. But, dude, anybody else that caught your eye?
Well, I'd start with Zach Pickens. I thought, and we've continued to hear, Wes, that he has come on throughout the spring. And I think a lot of us have been waiting, whether it was, media folks like us who cover the team, fans, even people within that building have just sort of been waiting. All right, when's the light going to come on for Zach Pickens? Like, it's going to happen, right? And I think we're seeing that. As spring has progressed, he's done a really nice job. We knew the kid had natural talent. Year one, it's transitioning from being more of an edge guy in high school to playing defensive tackle in the SEC. Year two, he shows some flashes. I think he's taken another step forward, it seems like, to where he understands technique more. He understands how to get off blocks, and then he uses that natural movement. A guy his size that can move like that. And he's now putting all those tools together and being disruptive in the backfield. He showed some ability to rush the passer. He showed some ability to stop the run. So that's one guy I would go with. Wes, Tyreek Johnson had a really nice sack in the game off the edge. If you saw in the broadcast, Mike Peterson, the edge coach for the Gamecocks defense, really fired up about that one. Tyreek's a kid that, man, he's been through a lot with injuries, had the gray shirt. When he first got to South Carolina, he's been through a couple major injuries. And is really doing a nice job, technically. Showed a really good first step playing outside as opposed to, he's played inside a good bit at South Carolina, moved outside there. And so those are a couple plays that flashed. But Zach Pickens, for me, was the individual guy that I think flashed the most.
Lots of talk about Debo Williams, I think, among the fan base. And, I thought with Debo, the thing that stood out to me, we've known the physicality is there. We've known that part was going to be there. And, Beamer talked about, hey, this guy, he may not always quite know exactly where he's supposed to be yet. That's going to come with time. But he naturally, instinctually, always seems to be around the football. So, whether it's game 1 or game 6 or it's the end of the year, I tend to think, based on those comments and what I saw with my own eyes, I think Debo Williams is a guy who will steadily be able to get more and more playing time. We saw Brad Johnson in there with the ones at sort of the Sam. We saw Damani Staley, I guess, would have been at the mic yesterday, and I did not notice Sherrod Green, I guess, at all. Did you see Sherrod on the field, Chris?
I do not recall seeing him on the field.
So, and again, we were covering Rivals camp in Atlanta yesterday, so everything we had to do was watching the TV copy. So I'm assuming that means Sherrod was one of the guys on the sideline. I know he's had some bumps and bruises as well. So, but Debo getting a lot of reps sort of with that second group that came out there. The thing I liked about it, Chris, was he was around the football in the passing game as well. And, came over, dislodged a ball that was going to be caught at one point. I think he did get maybe beat on one route down the field. Might have been dropping back into like a zone coverage or something. But that was sort of my question for him coming in. You start looking at the skill set. How does he maybe fit in as far as doing all the things you require from a linebacker? We knew the physical part was there. We knew he'd probably be a pretty good tackler. I liked that he looked comfortable moving around in space and dropping back into coverage as well. I think that bodes very, very well for his future at South Carolina.
Yeah, for sure. And everything that we heard about this kid coming in was just about his work ethic, his leadership ability, had that sort of future defensive team captain sort of vibe to him. And I certainly think he flashed in the game as well. Just his physicality and always being around the football. That's what you look for, and I think it's going to be a welcome addition. Again, I think going back to the big picture takeaway, Wes, for offense, defense, special teams, 3 new schemes. So these guys are still working through it. This football team that we saw yesterday, and this is fortunate for South Carolina, is not the finished product that they're going to be before game 1, before the end of the season. I think even they're going to continue working through all those things. Obviously, a lot of injuries, minor injuries that kept guys out, but also schematically still learning. And so when you mentioned that, hey, Debo may not always know where to go, that's going to be the case for a lot of players on this football team right now in all phases of the game, still learning those things, still, processing that information and then trying to put it on the field. So, but when you look at the physical tools and the work ethic of Debo Williams is a positive, I think, for this defense to have him continue to improve and emerge.
Yeah, I like the physicality we saw from some of the guys in the secondary. There's a play where Marcellus Dial came over and delivered a hit. OD Fortune was out there hitting the quarterback, I saw. So that's probably not good. Might get you a few extra runs from the coaching staff, but actually, I think for what the coaches have said as well has been more physical than maybe they even expected this spring. And I thought, dude, Cam Smith got called for a PI down there trying to cover EJ Jenkins on the goal line in the situational work. But I liked what I saw from Cam on that play because he came up, engaged with EJ, and said, you may be taller than me, but you're not gonna sort of out physical me. And he got called there, but I'll take that all day. I thought that was a good sign from Cam. We've heard his name pop up. He's going to have to be good. It's not even about, will he, can he, he wants to be good, whatever. He's going to have to be good if this defense is going to have a chance to take a step forward. So I liked some of that we saw. Did you catch the announcers when they talked about Dom Hill? They said Dominic Hill is a guy that Clayton White has talked about quite a bit to us. A lot of times the coaches are a little more open. In general, just talking about college football coaches, they're a little more open with what they tell the announcing crew as far as what's really going on. So I thought for them to say that the coaches have talked up Dom Hill, probably a pretty good sign for where he stands within, getting some playing time next year.
And I think Dom Hill, that ball that Gauthier threw to Ortre Smith, targeting him, I think Dom Hill was on coverage on that play, if I'm remembering correctly, and I think had a hand in helping break that pass up. So yeah, he didn't see a ton of balls thrown his way yesterday, and I think that's generally, if you're a DB, that's a positive. Unless if a ball is thrown your way, you make a play on it. But he's a guy, Wes. I mean, we scouted Dom Hill in high school. There's some traits there that were very interesting with his length, his ability to go run and cover. He's a guy that had some talent. So for him to continue coming along and progressing, I think is huge for this team. Same thing with Cam Smith. And then looking forward, the reality, in my opinion, for this defensive backfield is they've got to have some reinforcements come in and then see where those guys can play for you. A Ladarian Craig, Isaiah Norris, who I think has a chance to make a quick impact if he can pick things up. Carlin Splittell, the transfer. There's some guys out of this recruiting class that they're going to be counting on to, at the minimum, add some depth and add some competition. But Dom Hill flash, Cam Smith, like you said, obviously very thin in the secondary. But those guys did some good things. And, Marcellus Dial, even is a guy that some people are talking about right now, I think did some positive things in the game yesterday.
Yeah, we'll see if South Carolina maybe hits the transfer portal again potentially. I think that's the area if you are going to hit the portal. And Beamer didn't say a definite yes, but he didn't really rule it out either. DB is probably where you hit the portal. Now if some just absolute difference maker steps up, like pops in and wants to come to South Carolina in any position, save maybe running back, you almost have to take him. But I think if you're going to sort of go out there and say, well, who's a guy that can come in and help and maybe even just provide some depth, secondary is the spot I think you're going to do that at. I did talk to Tyrese Ross, the Washington State safety that's in the transfer portal, is originally from Jacksonville, played his high school ball in Atlanta, and is someone that South Carolina, at least as of late last week, has talked to. Didn't really sound like they've necessarily officially offered him yet. They're supposed to talk soon. Actually, they were going to talk after the spring game, so I'd imagine sometime this week. But he's a guy that I think you should keep an eye on as far as that position. He seemed very interested in South Carolina, interested in North Carolina, and actually interested in Central Florida. Gus Malzahn, I think, creating some buzz down there. And Addison Williams, actually former Gamecock Addison Williams, the safeties coach down there. So a little tie there for the Gamecocks, but we'll see what they do there. All right, so as we close out our spring practice sort of talk and our spring game talk, as I said, exams this week for the guys. They'll sort of have May off. What's next for you, Chris? Is there a single biggest like step that has to be taken this offseason? Is there something? What's your biggest offseason storyline based on what we learned from the last 15 practices?
Honestly, I was going to cheat at first and say my biggest storyline in the offseason is recruiting, right? But I do believe that wholeheartedly. It's short and long term. This team's got to recruit, and so that's going to be the focus throughout May. Then in June, recruiting reopens, and it's on from there. But we need to stick with the team, and I think that's what you really meant with your question. Is from a team standpoint, what they got now. What's the biggest emphasis? I think it's building depth and just ingraining these new schemes into this football team. Offense, defense, special teams. I said earlier, not a finished product with any of that stuff in terms of being able to get it fully, completely installed and ingrained. That's going to be the biggest thing. So just how can you maximize what you have on this roster? Obviously, we know that, for instance, when the running back room is fully healthy, you feel good about that group. Like you feel pretty good based on talent and what has already been shown on the field by some of these guys, that they're going to be in a decent spot there. But there are a lot of other questions. So receiver, continuing to improve, build depth, defensive back, maximizing what you have there, trying to build some depth, finding your best five. I think those are the biggest storylines.
I think I'm going to go really big picture here.
Yeah.
Last year, with the COVID shutdown, there were a lot of guys that I think had to fight through some conditioning issues when the fall came back.
Yeah.
Or when fall practice started, when football came back. There's a difference between being like in shape compared to the rest of us on the planet and being in Columbia late summer football shape. And, I think you look, and that was apparent early on last year. And also, I can't shake this feeling that I've sort of been told by some people I talked to, that there's a sense looking back that there was not good enough physical development from when guys arrive on campus to when they leave, under the previous staff as far as strength and conditioning. So, when a guy comes in as a true freshman, no matter how good he is, and already sort of developed he should look like a different person to an extent when he leaves as a junior or senior, because he's put on good weight, or he's sort of lost some bad weight and gained more definition. So I think to have another full 3 months with Luke Day and that staff and all those guys is the key for South Carolina, because we know there's going to be a lot of games they play. Frankly, they're not going to be the most talented team on the field. That's life in the SEC. That's where the program is right now. You're going to have to find an edge somewhere, and you have to at least be at the point where you're not finding yourself another disadvantage. You have to at least have as good of a strength and conditioning program as everyone else. So I think that's the key for this to be a great – and everybody – we're not going to know. Every program in the country has great summers of of strength and conditioning work. I almost said special teams, because that's in the back of my mind as well, that they're going to need to be really good on special teams. But they need to have an actual really good summer as far as strength and conditioning works. And if they do, then maybe this is a team that can surprise people. So we'll see. I had said, by the way, in the little summary for the show, that we'd talk about the Rivals camp a bit, but we've actually gone a full hour on the spring game. And because, Rivals camp really, it was Rivals exclusive. So the content will sort of still be unique and sort of fresh on Wednesday as well. I say we'll save the recruiting talk until Wednesday. And I guess we're going to get on out of here. Chris, you got any final thoughts, man?
No, man. I think we've covered a lot of ground. So continue breaking it down this week. Tons of content. We've already got a couple of things out from Rivals camp, and obviously from the spring game. We'll continue rolling out that information on GamecockCentral.com. So come check us out.
Yeah, by the way, appreciate everybody in the chat. Appreciate some kind words there from our guy Russ, from Fred Cooper, as always. Some loyal listeners and watchers there. And shout out to Craig. By the way, Craig wanted me to share this with y'all. Um, I think he's already got it set up. I haven't seen it, but he's set up a Facebook page called GC Live Members. I'm guessing it's a Facebook group, to be more specific, for everybody to sort of post some content, maybe schedule a future meetup, and also just connect with some people that are in this little chat room. So, Craig, I don't know if you're still on here, but at some point we'll get you to post that link in the chat so that everybody can see it. Otherwise, I think you can just maybe search for GC Live Members Group, and then Craig will, I'm sure, let you in there. So appreciate you setting that up, Craig. Appreciate everybody for listening or watching, and Chris and I will be back on Wednesday. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see you then.